the 5 life-changing tips to deal with avoidant attachment. Let's be honest, dealing with someone who has an avoidant attachment style can feel like you're constantly reaching for someone who keeps backing away. It's exhausting, confusing, and at times it messes with your sense of worth. But here's the truth, and you're not powerless. You're not at the mercy of someone else's fear of intimacy. And you certainly don't need to shrink to be loved. Let's dive into 5 powerful life-changing shifts you can make to handle avoidant dynamics. Not by trying to fix them, but by becoming unshakably rooted in your own value. When someone with an avoidant attachment style begins to pull away, it's easy to slip into self-doubt. You start asking yourself, did I do something wrong? Was I too much? Not enough? That spiral happens because somewhere along the way you learn to tie your worth to someone else's availability. But here's what you need to understand. Their distance is not a report card on your value. It's a reflection of how they deal with closeness, not a measurement of your desirability. Avoidant individuals tend to struggle with emotional intimacy. The closer things get, the more exposed they feel, and that exposure triggers discomfort. To cope, they create space, either emotionally or physically. They might become less responsive, more aloof, or even critical. And if you're someone who craves connection and emotional safety, that distancing can feel deeply personal. It hits like rejection, even if that's not their intent. That's where the emotional trap gets set. You start personalizing behavior that actually has more to do with their internal world than anything you've done. It's important to pause and recognize the difference between behavior that affects you and behavior that's about you. When an avoidant person pulls back, their behavior affects you. Yes, it can hurt and it can destabilize the connection. But that behavior is not about you. It's about their patterns, their history, and their coping mechanisms. Maybe they grew up in an environment where vulnerability wasn't safe, where independence was prized, or where emotional needs were ignored. These early experiences shape how people respond to closeness as adults, often without them realizing it. But here's the critical shift kit. Just because someone pulls away doesn't mean you need to chase. In fact, chasing usually reinforces the cycle. The more you reach, the more they retreat, not because you're doing anything wrong, but because their system reads closeness as a threat. So instead of chasing validation from someone who's afraid of intimacy, ground yourself in your own truth. Ask yourself, what do I know to be true about my worth, regardless of how they're acting? Because when you anchor your self-esteem to someone else's emotional availability, you're setting yourself up for a lifetime of instability. You can be compassionate toward them while still protecting yourself. I understand they're scared of closeness. And also say, but I deserve someone who's not afraid of connection. One doesn't cancel out the other. In fact, separating their pattern from your identity is one of the most empowering things you can do. It allows you to respond with clarity rather than reaction. You stop trying to fix or prove yourself and start observing, is this relationship actually healthy for me? Can they meet me halfway? If the answer is no, then it's not your job to carry the whole emotional load. Taking their distance personally not only harms your confidence, it also keeps you entangled in someone else's unresolved fear. When you stop doing that, you start seeing things as they are, not as you wish they'd be. And from that place of clarity, you get your power back. One of the most common mistakes people make when dealing with someone who has an avoidant attachment style is overgiving. It comes from a good place. You care, you want connection, and you're trying to bridge gap that their emotional distance creates. But overgiving in a relationship with an avoidant partner often leads to emotional depletion, frustration, and resentment. What starts as love and effort slowly turns into a performance for approval, where your sense of security depends on their reaction. This is where the imbalance begins. And it's also where you start losing yourself. When someone pulls away or becomes emotionally unavailable, the instinct for many is to lean in harder. You send longer texts, you try to be more understanding, more patient, more available. You think, if I just love them enough, if I just show how committed I am, maybe they'll come around. But what this often does is create an emotional chase dynamic. The more you give without reciprocation, the more you teach them, consciously or unconsciously, that they don't need to show up emotionally to keep you around. And that's dangerous, not because you're doing something wrong by caring, but because love without boundaries quickly becomes sacrifice. Matching energy isn't about playing games. It's about preserving your self-respect. It's saying, I'm not going to keep investing in someone who isn't willing or able to meet me where I'm at. When you do that, you communicate something powerful, that your love is generous but not endless, that you are kind but not to the point of self-abandonment. This doesn't mean being cold or withholding. It means observing. How much are they actually showing up for you? Are they consistent? Are they emotionally present? Are they putting in any effort to deepen the connection? And if they're not, then the answer isn't to overcompensate. It's to step back. This is especially important when you have a giving nature. You may be someone who naturally leads with empathy and support, which is beautiful, but without discernment, that empathy can turn into self-neglect. You start measuring your value by how much you give rather than how well you're treated. And in a relationship with someone avoidant, that dynamic gets reinforced quickly because avoidants often don't ask for more. They quietly pull away, creating a vacuum. And it's in that vacuum that givers start to overfunction, trying to fill every emotional gap. The truth is, a healthy relationship is reciprocal, not 50 or 50 every day, but a rhythm of mutual effort and care. If you're always initiating, always reaching out, always carrying the emotional weight, that's not a rhythm, it's a rescue mission. And you're not here to rescue someone from their fear of intimacy. You're here to co-create a connection where both people feel safe, seen, and supported. Matching effort doesn't mean punishing someone by withdrawing love. It means choosing where to invest your energy with wisdom. It means recognizing when your giving has stopped being a gift and started being a plea. And when that happens, it's not on you to give more. It's on you to remember your worth. Setting boundaries when dealing with someone who has an avoidant attachment style isn't just helpful, it's essential. Without boundaries, you risk becoming emotionally entangled in a dynamic that constantly leaves you guessing, hoping, and overextending. And the thing about avoidant partners is that they often won't explicitly cross your boundaries. They'll simply live in the gray areas. They won't yell or manipulate in obvious ways. Instead, they'll go quiet for days, stay vague about commitment, or emotionally check out in moments when you're trying to connect. If you don't have clear standards, it becomes about you not. All too easy to normalize that behavior, even though it chips away at your emotional well-being. Boundaries aren't about building walls. They're about defining where your comfort and safety begin and end. They give you a structure to stand on when someone else's behavior starts to feel confusing or inconsistent. When someone you're dating disappears for days without explanation or avoids emotional conversations altogether, you might feel tempted to brush it off. You might think, this is just how they are, or I don't want to come off as needy. But what you're really doing in those moments is abandoning yourself in favor of maintaining the connection. And over time, that kind of self-abandonment turns into resentment, even if you're not fully aware of it. The courage to set a boundary starts with recognizing that your needs are valid. Wanting consistency doesn't make you clingy. Desiring emotional connection doesn't make you high maintenance. You're allowed to say, I need to feel emotionally safe in this relationship, and then follow that statement with action. That might look like having a direct conversation. When I don't hear from you for days, I feel anxious and disconnected. I understand that you value space, but I need a partner who can communicate more regularly. If that's not something you're willing or able to do, this may not be the right fit for me. That's not a clarity. What often keeps people from setting boundaries is fear. Fear of losing the person, fear of being too much, fear of being alone. But what's the cost of not setting them? You stay in situations that drain you. You silence yourself to avoid rocking the boat. You wait for someone else to make you feel chosen while you keep putting your own needs last. Boundaries help you step out of that pattern. They don't control the other person. They control what you're willing to participate in. That's where your power is. And the beauty of boundaries is that they're not just for the other person. They're also for you. They remind you of who you are and what you deserve. They allow you to stay grounded when someone else's actions start to destabilize you. And they create space for the right people to come closer, the ones who don't see your needs as a burden, but as an invitation to grow a real connection. When you're in a relationship with someone who has an avoidant attachment style, expressing your emotions can feel like walking a tightrope. You want to be honest, this isn't about you not, but you're afraid that showing too much feeling will scare off or make them retreat even further. This fear often leads people to either hold everything in or express themselves in a way that comes across as desperate. Begging for closeness, pleading for reassurance, or trying to control the other person's response. But real connection doesn't come from emotional pressure, it comes from grounded vulnerability. The kind where you speak your truth, not to get a reaction, but to honor your experience. Vulnerability is not weakness, it's clarity with an open heart. It's the ability to say, this is how I feel, without needing the other person to fix it, chase you, or respond perfectly. When you're dealing with someone avoidant, this kind of communication is even more important because avoidants tend to pull away when they feel overwhelmed or emotionally cornered. If your expression comes from panic or urgency, it may trigger their fear of being engulfed. But when you communicate from a place of calm self-awareness, you're giving them the chance to step into the moment instead of run from it. This starts with checking in with yourself before you speak. Are you sharing to connect or are you sharing to be rescued? There's a big difference. If you're speaking just to get validation or to pull them closer, your energy will come across as heavy and it may push them further away. But if you're grounded in your self-worth, you can say something like, I feel a little distant from you lately, and I want to understand what's going on between us. That's not needy. It's honest. You're opening a door, not about you not banging on it. You don't need to suppress your feelings to keep the peace. You don't need to silence your needs just because someone else has a lower emotional bandwidth. But you also don't need to pour everything out all at once in a moment of emotional overwhelm. There's a middle ground where your feelings are expressed with strength and clarity, not fear and pressure. That's where real intimacy begins. When you speak vulnerably, not to manipulate, not to cling, but to connect, you give the other person a chance to step forward, not. And if they can't or won't, that's information. That's clarity. That tells you something important about the emotional landscape you're in. A person's reaction to your vulnerability will reveal a lot about their capacity for connection. Some will lean in, some will shut down. But your job isn't to manage their response. It's to stay connected to your truth. It's to express, not impressed. It's to be real, not rehearsed. You're not trying to win someone over with your pain. You're inviting them to see you fully and honestly. Whether they rise to meet that or not, you've already won by showing up as your authentic self. In relationships where one person has an avoidant attachment style, it's easy to fall into the habit of waiting for them to text, to open up, to show affection, to finally commit. The waiting becomes a quiet ritual disguised as patience but rooted in self-neglect. You start measuring your emotional safety by their level of engagement. And without even realizing it, you begin to place your self-worth in their hands. But here's the truth, and the most powerful shift you can make is choosing yourself. Not once, but consistently. Choosing yourself doesn't mean giving up on love. It means recognizing that love, at its healthiest, should never cost you your peace, your dignity, or your identity. When you consistently prioritize someone else's needs and fears over your own emotional well-being, you begin to shrink. You become careful not to upset them, not to trigger their discomfort, not to need too much. But your needs are not too much. They're human, and they deserve to be met with presence, not silence. Avoidant individuals often struggle with closeness because it threatens sense of control or autonomy. Their instinct may be to detach when things get emotionally intense, but that's not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their pattern. Still, if you're not grounded in your own self-value, you'll internalize their distance as rejection. That's where the cycle becomes harmful. You begin to hustle for scraps of affection. You mistake occasional attention for genuine care. And you stop asking yourself the most important question: is this relationship actually fulfilling for me? Choosing yourself means pausing long enough to answer that question honestly. It means stepping back from emotional chasing and tuning into how you feel on a daily basis. Do you feel seen, heard, loved in a way that feels secure? Or are you constantly questioning where you stand? If the latter is true, your job isn't to work harder for their love. It's to return to your center, to remind yourself of the love you deserve and stop settling for a dynamic that keeps you emotionally malnourished. It also means trusting that letting go of someone who can't meet you where you are is not a failure. It's an act of self-respect. When you choose yourself, you create space for people who are capable of choosing you back. People who don't flinch at intimacy, who don't confuse independence with emotional unavailability, who don't disappear when things get real. These people exist, but you won't see them clearly if your energy is still tied to someone who only shows up halfway. This is the quiet power of choosing yourself. It shifts your standards, your energy, and your trajectory. You stop asking, how can I get them to love me? And start asking, is this love healthy for me? You become the one in control, not of them, but of your own path. That's not selfish. That's emotional maturity. It's realizing that being chosen is not the goal. Choosing yourself is every day, in every interaction, and especially in the ones where love feels confusing, conditional, or out of reach. Thank you so much for being here, for showing up for yourself, and for being open to growing through this. These conversations aren't always easy, but they're where transformation begins. Take what resonates with you, leave what didn't. Remember this, you are already enough. And anyone who's meant to love you won't be afraid of meeting you there. Until next time, stay grounded, stay true, and never stop choosing you. Thank you.